name is Karsten Neuhoff and I'm working with the Climate Initiative based in Berlin. I'd like to extend the discussions a little bit. Right now we've got a lot of focus on the question of what is going to be the emission reduction target for developed countries, what is going to be the level of resources that will be made available to support developing countries. And I think both of these objectives are very crucial to achieve our emission reduction. But they will not get us very far if we don't have the right instruments in place to actually deliver these long-term objectives. And that is the second part of the discussions that are happening right now at the Bella Center. There are a lot of discussions going on 4 points, how we can actually make our targets that we define happen at the end. One discussion is on the question of low-emission development strategies. Countries not only need to put out on the table where they want to have their emissions in the year 2020, but had initially said they might consider outlining how they want to achieve this objective. What are going to be the changes they see happen in their economies and in their countries, such that we can track step by step as to where things are moving, and such that we can actually make sure that the interactions across the different sectors are respected. For example, right now many actors in our economy say they want to reduce CO2 emissions by using biomass. But there is only so much biomass in our economies, so we have to make sure that these strategies are consistent across our different sectors of the economies. That is why it is important for all countries to develop low-emission development plans. That was in the draft text until last night and was taken out, as far as I understand, last night from the text. And without these plans, it's going to be very difficult to coordinate the activity. I think Copenhagen has the opportunity for heads of state to come together and say, we start this process of thinking of a long-term transition to emission reductions, and we use this opportunity to start a process where we go home and discuss in our countries how we want to make that transition. But the second component is making the plan reality. And that's, I think, where the biggest improvement is in the text relative to the last years. There's a very clear formulation of NAMAs, National Appropriate Mitigation Actions. These NAMAs help us to define what we need to do to make actually the transition happen in key activities of our economies. For example, a NAMA can define in South Africa how to make a transition strategy from coal to concentrated solar power. So it can define the feed-in tariff that is necessary, it can define the regulatory environment, and all the components that have to be in place to make this transition happen. I'm reporting right now about a project that we've pursued with climate strategies, with partners in India, China, Ghana, South Africa, and Brazil. And each one of the partners was looking quite carefully in terms of what is necessary to make such a transition happen. How to move trucks on the rail in Brazil. How to get renewable energy used in Ghana. How to move to more efficient agricultural pump sets in India. And we found out in these studies that it is really necessary to put forward a set of individual actions together to facilitate that transition. It was fascinating in the workshops our partners organized with academics, policymakers and industry in their country, how big the interest was of the participants to really think carefully what are the things that are necessary, what are the obstacles and what are the opportunities for their country. But many of these NAMAs will not happen if they do not get international support. And that is the third component of the mechanism that we need. The support mechanisms that help developing countries to really make sure any one of these NAMAs can be implemented. There are 4 types of support that are currently discussed. Technical assistance to start the discussions. Then capacity building to train up people in some of the areas in some countries. And more important also, technology cooperation to make sure that we develop the technology and adopt the technology to the circumstances of the country. And probably the most challenging one, financial assistance. There are big numbers on the table. People say we need between 60 and 100 billion euro or dollar per year to support the low-carbon transition in developing countries. That's quite a big number, and we are quite far away from signing up to this number yet. But I think we need the support for developing countries to allow these countries to also implement the NAMAs in their country. for the moment, what is discussed is 10 billion per year for the next 3 years. I think it's a starting point. I think it's good if head of states would sign up to this number by end of this week, but I think we have to get quite a bit further and have a longer-term commitment to making significant amounts of public finance available to target support to the different numbers which countries will propose. And there are a lot of discussions which still have to go on, not only this week, but in the next and coming month, because we don't know whether it's best to kind of provide the support between countries bilaterally, or whether it's better to have a fund that provides the support to individual actors. So far, in the past, most of the discussion was about offsetting, about a CDM mechanism to provide this funding. I don't think the offsetting mechanism will get us very far, because it focuses on the lowest cost emission reduction opportunities. What we do need here is start the transition. So quite often it is more difficult to start something at the beginning. It's a bit more expensive. So we might need to provide the support, the financing upfront, the credit guarantees or the loans that are necessary to really make this transition happen. And I think that could be one of the most important outcomes of this meeting, if governments sign up to that level of support that is necessary. But fourth, and finally, nothing happens if you just make big announcements and can't really see what happens afterwards. We went out and asked a lot of industry participants, what do you do? How do you manage your firms? And they told us we need a lot of information about what is happening in our firms. They use indicators to measure the inputs, to measure kind of what is the process of what is evolving in their firm, the outputs of what they are producing, and the outcomes, how people are actually enjoying the products afterwards. How do policymakers, how can they make good decisions if they don't have that information? So a lot of information is necessary to make good policies, to implement the policies, to adopt the policies to evolving time changes. And I think it's therefore crucial for governments to have that information, and crucial for governments to sign up and commit to make that information available and to collect that information. So far we have, in developed and developing worlds, far too little information. Without information, without that data, it's going to be also difficult to compare what is working in one country and why it might be working better in another country. I hope we can learn from each other. Otherwise, we will not be able to reduce our CO2 emissions quick enough. So again, it's crucial to have information and to report that internationally from all the activities that we're doing in all our countries, to manage the implementation, to learn from each other, and to be accountable to our own population. What's the worth of heads of state making big announcements out about emission reductions if we, in the broader public, can't afterwards go back and see actually whether they do the actions that are necessary to achieve the long-term emission reductions? So I think the text and the mechanisms that are being proposed right now and discussed, they really could be a crucial component to make climate mitigation action happen. And I hope some of the good ideas that are being discussed will really be in the final text and can get a lot more attention and help us to make these mechanisms happen in the next month as we go forward. This is only one of the components, but I think it is crucial for all of us to sit together and look carefully at the mechanisms, because if we don't look at the mechanisms, the big targets and the big numbers mentioned at the beginning will not really work. And I leave you here and wish you good luck in your support for all the activities.